Hello, hello. Welcome back to another episode of the Sly Hooper Podcast, brought to you by the Blue Wire Hustle Podcast Network. We are previewing the Cavs in this episode, and I know I said this episode would come out the day after I did the Sixers preview podcast with my Blue Wire Hustle teammate David Arroyo, but some scheduling conflicts. You had to push it back a day. It's all good. The homie's always welcome on the podcast, and that homie is Evan Dammarell. He's been on a few times. Actually, he's made the most guest appearances on this podcast. Good friend, started out at hashtag basketball together, and he's been a rising star, especially covering Cleveland sports, editor of Fear the Sword, co-host of the Locked On podcast with Chris Manning, and now he has a new venture, writing for Facebook Bulletin, and we'll let him explain what that venture is, how he got to Facebook Bulletin, and just what led up to it, and the long rollout that he did that was pretty suspenseful. It's going to cover all Cleveland sports now, but I imagine it's going to be a lot more Cavs-centric because that's where his attention is. We actually went a bit long in this podcast, but I don't mind because it's always good talking to Evan. And just, when two friends are just talking hoops, that's what you get. You get a long podcast. And it was fun, though. And it was interesting. I think the Cavs are one of the more interesting young cores in the NBA because I do think there are some flaws, but there's a lot of promise there, too, because there's Darius Garland and Evan Mobley. And that, in my opinion, is the backbone of the franchise. And, we talk about Colin Sexton, too, is really good. Some Issac Okoro second-year expectations, the Jarrett Allen extent. We go over all of it. And we determine at the end whether or not the Cavs will make the play-in. And I asked exactly one Ben Simmons question because I am Simmons'd out. But without further ado, here's Evan Dammarell. All right, we're talking Cleveland Cavaliers today. We are going to preview them. They are interesting in some ways, even though LeBron left 2 years, or was it 2 or 3? 2 years ago, right? 3 years ago.
4 years ago. Was
it 4 years ago?
Yeah.
This is LeBron's fourth season with the Lakers, isn't it?
Yeah, I was 24 when that happened. I feel so old. I'm closer to 30 than I am 20 because of LeBron James leaving.
I'm going to be 30 next month, so I'm not dreading it. But that voice is Evan Dammarell. He's the co-host of the Locked On Cavs podcast. He co-hosted with Chris Manning. Used to be at Forbes Sports, but now he has a new endeavor. I should also mention he's the editor of Fear the Sword, which is the SB Nation Cavs blog. But Evan has a new endeavor now. He writes for Facebook Bulletin, and his section is called Down Euclid, which is a signature call from the late, great Fred McLeod. Rest in peace. So, Evan Dammarell, hello. Welcome back.
Hello. Hey. I still haven't watched Attack on Titan, but how are you? I just want to update you up front. I've been a little busy this summer since we last spoke, obviously, but I've been watching Kuroko, and I'm enjoying it whenever I have some free time. But I'm all things considered, I'm good, man. Not a whole lot's up. I'm glad to be back on one of my favorite podcasts, one of my regular listens, and I'm just good, all things considered. How are you?
Like we were talking about first of all, the Attack on Titan, just it kills me. But I'm not one of those guys that's gonna browbeat you over the head with Attack on Titan. Watch it, because
I've tried several. If folks are regular listeners to any of Jordan's work, he's attempted 5 or 6 times, I believe, at this point on air to get me to watch it, and I've tried every time, and I'm just like, I can't. I'm like a basic white girl. I can't even.
Oh. Being from Bakersfield, actually, you know what? I'm just gonna leave it at that. So. I was saying before we were recording, I'm good, except in my sports life. Being a fan of three different teams from three different cities, your sports experience can be varied. And unfortunately, the stars have aligned to where all my teams are just trying to send me to the shadow realm, like right away, the 10th dimension of sports hell. And between the Padres just utterly collapsing, I won't mention him until the end, but the whole Sixers and the you-know-who saga. And then I read the report today that Tom Brady wanted to come to the 49ers, and they basically said no. He's marginally better than Jimmy Garoppolo, which made me dead on the inside. And but other than that, I'm good. I'm peachy, and I'm ready to talk about something I'm going to ask exactly one Ben Simmons question all the way at the end. So that's it. But
you said his name.
I did say his. I know. I just broke my own rule again.
Fill out your bingo sheets at home, folks. I'm looking at this Tom Brady thing. I didn't know about this.
Mm-hmm.
That is tough.
It was.
I liked his theoretical fit with the Niners too.
It was reported too, like they were looking at Tom Brady like way back when. But now this book that's come out with all the details, it's like. But anyway,
it's even tougher because he grew up a Niners fan. He was there for the catch.
He's a native. He's a San Mateo native. But
Evan, I'm rubbing some salt in the wound to get you going.
You love doing that, and I also know that you were behind that Locked On Cavs tweet where Tristan Thompson hit a 3 in Philadelphia before Ben Simmons, which is a factual statement.
It's our social media intern, also named Evan. Full stop, folks. If you do reach out to ask for an internship, the answer is still no. We've been asked in the past, and I'm just like, buddy, I don't think we have the budget. It's like when somebody approached me once saying like, hey, do you guys have any full-time jobs at Fear the Sword? And I'd like sit there and think about it for a second. I'm like, how do I put them down gently? And I'm like, listen, I get paid nowhere near full-time salary to be an editor for this website. I don't think we have the funds to pay you full-time and give you benefits to write for us.
I don't think you had the facilities for that, big man.
Yeah, exactly.
So, Evan, before we talk about the Cavaliers, because I do think even though they're projected to be a play-in team, I'm not so sure about that, but we'll get into it. They are still interesting nonetheless. But first, let's talk about your new endeavor with a Facebook Bulletin. It was a long rollout that was akin to a Kanye West album rollout, but I wanted to text you, a few months back, even before you announced it, before you could make it official.
I don't know.
But
I
was
know
like,
whether to be flattered or insulted by that, because either you think I'm a genius like Yeezy, or you think I'm insane like Yeezy, and I toe the line more often than not.
Column A, little column B.
Little column A, column B. Yeah, balance is good in life.
I wanted to text you and be like, hey man, we're just friend to friend. Where are you working at? But then you had the suspense up so well. You held it up so well that I was like, you know what? No. I'm gonna find out through an announcement. I just have to know. I just want to sit back and wait. But let's talk about your new. Let's talk about your new endeavor with Write Down Euclid on a Facebook Bulletin.
So yeah, I do feel bad because I was gonna launch back in July initially, and then alongside every other like national writer, because I'm locally based in Cleveland. For full disclosure, if my bosses at Facebook are listening, and from what I gather, they listen and consume a lot of content that their people make. But so you had folks like Aaron Andrews, Paul Lucas from UniWatch is somebody I've connected with during this process too. Like they were the first people launched, and they kind of had more of a national syndication. And they're like, okay, well, we're gonna let them have their moment in the sun. Literally like a half hour before I was supposed to launch, like I had every announcement ready to go. I had all my branding set up. It's been a fun process. It's been really cool. Weirdly enough, you and I were talking about this, like just betting on yourself, like going solo and everything like that, and just kind of like doing what you love to do. I was genuinely unhappy with what I was doing. I was working in engineering full time. It's what I study. I study biomedical engineering at the University of Akron, who was, at one point up 7-0 on Ohio State before the rest of the game happened. But I just wasn't happy. I was frustrated.
Yeah.
So I was just kind of looking around. It's hard to get into media, especially in Cleveland. Like, in my background is sports coverage. Like, you and I got started at #basketball. I was covering the Hornets, and then slowly worked my way from there to Oklahoma City to the Cavs, and then I did the Cavs, Team USA, and NBA 2K before I left to cover the Cavs for just a couple other blogs, and then like you mentioned at the top, I was at Forbes for a while, and then I was just like, this is really fun. I enjoy doing this. I finally had full media credentials through Forbes. I was getting to know people and like the community and getting to know people on the team and executives and things like that. And like, I felt pretty comfortable in saying like, okay, I think if I took this chance, I'd have a good shot, but I need that shot to materialize. So this is back in December of last year, January of last year, January of this year. And I was just scrolling through one night because I couldn't sleep because I was, again, frustrated with my work situation. And I'm just like, I have to get up in a couple hours and I'm going to be annoyed the entire day. And it's tough because, and then like, so I'm like scrolling through, and then I think it was like Gizmodo or like an offshoot website of like that caliber, like just announced that like Facebook is investing in local news initiatives. And I'm like, okay. So I went on to the like actual like development site, and then they're like, yeah, no, we're looking for applications for locally based journalists, blah, blah, blah. We would appreciate if you're independent, because it's like, no, we don't have to break contracts and stuff. I'm like, well, I'm all these things. And I'm just like, oh, what the hell? I'll apply. I didn't hear a word. I applied to a couple other jobs, didn't get them, unfortunately. And then I was just kind of frustrated still, just unhappy. And I said this in my intro post, but like, I was with a company before this who let me go due to downsizing. And I told myself then and there, I'm going to do something to put myself in this situation and never be like this again, where I'm so genuinely unhappy every day. And obviously didn't listen to my advice at first because I ended up in the same situation like that. But, but it was my, like, I think of Tyler, the Creator, when he mentions how he got
technical difficulties. That happens in show business sometimes. But you were mentioning Tyler, the Creator, and you were bringing up an example with him. So let's pick up right there.
Okay. So yeah, so have you ever seen the interview where Tyler was sharing about how he was fired from Starbucks and it was the single greatest thing that ever happened to him?
Yes, I have. Yep.
Yeah. So that's what my thought process was behind my intro post. Because again, that happened. Like, I was let go. I worked my ass off. I was on salary, so I worked more than like 2-3 weeks worth of work in a week, and that was the expectation for months on end. And I'm just like, you know what? Fuck you all. I'm never going to be in a situation like this again. So like, this opportunity came along. I didn't think anything was going to happen. So I'm like, you know what? Maybe it's just not meant to be. That is what I told myself back in May. I was just like, May 1st. I just said, like, I just don't think this is meant to be. It is what it is. Like, it's okay. Like, I was getting ready to move on. And then my now boss emailed me saying like, hi, Evan. My name's Sam. Like, do you have time to talk tomorrow? Like, me and a few others are going to talk about this opportunity. I'm like, I forgot I applied to this, but I'm just like, yeah, let's do it. And then, so I chatted with them, and then they literally offered me the position on the spot. They're like, yeah, we really want to bring you on. Like, we've been monitoring your work from afar for a few months. That's probably that was why there was a delay in our response, because we wanted to like make sure you were legitimate and like passionate about your community. And like the whole, like you said at the top, right Down Euclid is a homage to Fred McLeod, who is my childhood idol, and part of the reason why I fell in love with the Cavs, just because of his play calling and how energetic and excited he got. One of the genuinely nicest people I've ever met too.
Yep.
His death really hurt when it happened, and I think he's still going to be a staple. I mean, the Cavs,
the entire NBA community.
For sure. Like,
it was
the Cavs named their media room after him, so like that's a special tribute to him now too. And like during the pandemic, they redesigned it so it's a little bit more, because Fred was known for his ties, so I think the door handles are ties now and everything like that too. So like it's a nice little it's the little thing.
All the play-by-play announcers, the local play-by-play announcers, were wearing different colorful ties and stuff to honor him. It was really cool to see.
I wonder, so I don't know if it was the case for all of those guys, but Fred had an extensive tie collection, and his wife Beth was like, Fred always said you needed a good tie, guys. A lot of members who were like established on the beat for a very long time, Beth sent them like a personalized, like a hand-picked tie from Fred, and then like they wore that on opening night, and then like a lot of the media and like a lot of the staffers and PR folks had them on too. Like, it was a nice touch. But
yeah,
so Fred that was the homage to the name, and now I'm fully independent. I mean, yes, I'm technically employed by Facebook, but I'm fully independent. They don't control what I do and don't say. They're just big, like they provide the resources for me in order to succeed.
And they let you cook.
Yeah, they let me cook. They said, yeah, you can talk about sports. You can talk about the Browns. You can talk about the soon-to-be Guardians. You can talk about the Cavs, even though God knows why you want to listen or hear talk about them. But it's not just that. It's their impact on the community as well. And I think the cool thing is with working for a social media company like this is you have the luxury of interacting with your fans and readers directly.
Yep.
And saying like, okay, well, what do you want to hear about? Because I've said a few times now, like I'm only one person. I can only cover so many topics in a given day, and most of my focus is the Cavs right now because they're almost back and I'm gearing up for the season. And then like just to tease a story that's maybe coming in the coming weeks, probably about mid-October, like I had a reader reach out and say like, hi, I play for the semi-professional rugby team in Cleveland. We're actually competing for the national championship. And he's just like, would you want to come out and cover a game and just like chat with us? I'm just like, hell yeah, I want to come out and chat with you guys. Cause I played a little bit of rugby in college, and I was just like, I sucked, but I played a little bit. And then,
oh wow,
it's been really cool getting to know these guys and just like learn about the community, learn about just like the impact, how it's growing in Northeast Ohio. Like it's not a high school, it's not officially recognized or sanctioned by the OHSAA, which is the Ohio High School Athletic Association, but it's growing and gaining legitimacy. And I'm like, you know what? Yeah, if I didn't meet you guys, I would have no idea that any of this existed. And like, it's really cool. There's like a couple thousand people that come out, and I'm like, you know, maybe more people should be aware of this. So it's stuff like that. I'm always open to hearing pitches. Another example is it's something about birding and Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse. I won't share too many details, but it's a very interesting story. And I said, I'll be frank with you. If you didn't reach out to me about this, I would have had no idea. Because I don't bird for a living. Like I have friends who do that because they picked it up as a pandemic hobby, and I'm just like, no offense to folks who like to bird, but I think there's better ways I'd like to spend my time than getting up at 5 a.m. on a Saturday to go watch a certain bird. Like,
so the funny thing is,
on the water.
Funny thing is, I have a lot of friends who go. The college I went to is Humboldt State. It's way, way, way up in Northern California, surrounded by redwood trees and nature. And birding is like one of the activities to do up there. It was a course too in college, and so I had a lot of friends who bird, and we had a club rugby team, so I would see a few rugby games. So like this is it's pretty interesting to hear you talk about this stuff. It's good that you're out there covering the community too independently, because I think that's one, you're obviously a native, but you are also like you also do a great job covering the Cavs. You're passionate about Cleveland sports, and it's really dope to see. And we'll touch on a few articles that you've dropped the last few days and write Down Euclid. And also going back to the Kanye West corollary, nice preview of the rugby story. The nice little album rollout.
I put a hard deadline on myself, but because I've learned I need to stop doing that, because when I wrote about Ricky Rubio today, I'm like, yeah, I'll have that done by Friday.
Oh, I had to learn to stop doing that too. Yeah.
Tuesday evening, I'm just like, fuck, I have nothing yet. And I have no motivation to write about it right now because I'm so tired. And then you just got to dig deep, man. Ricky Rubio, I'm excited about him. We'll have to talk about him at some point too.
Well, one of the guards I do want to bring up first is one Mr. Colin Sexton, who has been I feel like, for full disclosure, if people don't follow Evan on social media, there was a little saga over the summer. Evan kind of had his anime character arc development, if you want to be a little nerdy about it. But he was he was kind of labeled as a hater of Colin Sexton. And I have to say, I feel partially responsible too, because I would like to apologize, because I was on a Locked On Cavs episode, and I did pose the question, if the Cavs get the number 1 pick in the draft, would you trade Darius Garland or Colin Sexton if it meant getting Cade Cunningham, and you picked Colin Sexton? And I remember the Cavs Discord reacted to the Locked On Cavs Discord that I'm in, with obviously you and Chris Manning moderate that whole community. They reacted to the episode in a nice way because they know that I'm in there, I feel, but they were like, why why are we always talking about trading Sexton? And apparently that was one of the most listened to episodes that month, and I feel like that started
Still
because
is.
in
general, it's still our most listened to.
I'm sorry.
Don't worry about it. I think I was on my social media hiatus at that point too, so I just didn't really bother checking it. But I told Jordan this. I took a break from Twitter just as a mental purge towards the end of last season, just because I was tired of the toxicity. I changed some settings, and I just came back and carpet bombed Sexton Twitter with all the trade rumors I was hearing. So, like, seeing it as my anime character arc, like that's the nicer way of putting it. I felt like I was being a terrorist for these people, these kids at sometimes, because like it's the Gen Z culture where like they make like the stan accounts and stuff, and like I just don't get it because I'm almost 30, but like our listeners, if like you're a regular listener, because folks who join our server for the most part, I want to say are regular listeners of the show. And they know where I stand on Colin. They know 3 years ago I said, yeah, he could be a 6-man, but
that was my projection for him too. I was not a Sexton fan. You know this. I was not a Sexton fan when he was coming out of Alabama.
Oh, I wasn't either. I hated the pick, well, partially because this is the kid we got for trading Kyrie Irving. Because I mean, look at this way: Ante Zizic was the last piece of that trade, and he just left Cleveland not too long ago. Then there's Isaiah Thomas and Jay Crowder, who barely lasted half a season there, and so it's tough, man. Like, you say that 2 years ago, and like people crystallize your entire opinion based on that. They just don't.
You're not allowed to change your opinion as the facts go. You know this. Number one rule of the internet.
Oh, it's the number one rule of the internet is like if you say something 2 years ago, it's held against you since, and like
screenshot it.
Yeah, they're like people are saying like. Or like the Nekias clips, like we have the film. Like,
oh yeah, we saw you.
Yeah, we saw you.
There is film.
Yeah, the Denzel Valentine thing yesterday introduced me to that, and I was just like,
yeah, you got quote tweeted by Nekias, and that kind of gained some traction.
Nekias is a good dude.
Yeah, he's smart as hell too. Like,
oh, he's one of the smartest people I've ever interacted with basketball, and I've said this a few times on my show, and I'll say it on here. Like, an NBA team would be foolish not to hire him, either in an analytical role or as a writer. Like, if he could do a little bit of column A, column B, they'd be pretty good off, because he's such an intelligent basketball writer too. And like you can tell he loves talking about it, which is incredibly refreshing, because a lot of people who cover this sport can get jaded, myself included sometimes. But
I watched basketball and played basketball, and my dad was a high school coach, and I learned all types of things when I listened to the Dunker Spot or read Nekias's work. But anyway, continue.
Yeah. No, and so it's funny you mentioned that as an offshoot. Like, I have friends, my co-host Chris Manning included, who like sometimes judge me when they say, well, what kind of podcast do you like to listen to? And I'm like, it's like, do you like to listen to like The Low Post or any of these basketball pods? Like a huge list. Like, I know people who like live, breathe, and eat basketball pods. And I'm just like, yeah, I listen to The Low Post every now and then. Like, what do you mean every now and then? I'm like, well, if he has a guest, it's like interesting, sure. But I'm like, I support my homies, and that's it. Like, I'll listen to their content, especially if it's like ingratiated. Like,
sounded like some
stuff.
Gatekeeping questions.
It did, but and then I like counter back by saying like, listen, especially now that I do this full time, but like I talk about the Cavs 3 times a week in the off season, 5 times a week during the regular season, and maybe the postseason one day. I write about them at various spots. I have to edit them. I am in online discourse and conversations about them every day. When I'm consuming a podcast, I'm trying to entertain myself. The last thing I want to do is listen to somebody regurgitate takes on something I've already like talked about a zillion times. Like Ben Simmons, like we talked about this too. Like, we only have one Ben Simmons question, and I thank you for that, because we talked about Ben Simmons for about a month straight on my podcast, and my co-host had to say like, guys, stop with the Ben Simmons questions. Like that, and like Kevin Love stuff. Like, we're tired of talking about those two, because like it's just like. So, but getting back on track here. So, Colin, I like Colin a lot as a player.
Same.
I'm really bullish on Young Bull, pun intended there. I think entering his contract season, this is going to be interesting. I do wonder, because of the Michael Porter Jr. extension, that maybe there's a little bit more pressure now on his camp and the Cavs to kind of come to an agreement before the season starts, because I was talking to an executive about this in the Western Conference the other day, and they're like, yeah, Colin could test the waters, but there's a realistic outcome where he could get Dennis Schroeder and have to sign like a really middling contract because the money just dries up like instantly because Harden's a free agent, Kyrie's a free agent. Like those are two of the bigger names. Like yeah, they'll likely stay in Brooklyn, but crazier things have happened. And then if you look at it like teams with cap right now, if the Wizards do something with Brad Beal, they'll have cap. Then you have like Memphis and you have San Antonio. Like maybe Memphis makes sense if they want to offload some of their older talent and they keep like this perpetual rebuild they're doing, because I was so high on the Grizzlies, and then the moves they made this offseason
I agree.
sit back, and I'm just like,
I agree.
You have Ja Morant right here. You need to like put your pedals to the metal a little bit and start like
you get some shooting, maybe
a
healthy season from Jaren Jackson Jr. Like, can we just have that first?
You have found the guy. Now build around it. Like the Mavericks are doing a poor job of it at times with Luka, but at least they're trying.
Yeah.
But back to Colin. Fans like his diehard die in the Wolf fans. The cult of Sexton is Sexton's person. The cult of personality of Colin Sexton is what I like to call them sometimes. Also, I call them crazy people, because quite literally one of them threatened to kill me, and that's when I was just like, okay, I'm gonna pull away for a little bit. But people will pull up that old evidence, and I'm just like, because we had to do player reviews at Fear the Sword. And Chris and I were doing sign-ups beforehand, and he's like, okay, just go through and take any player you want. And I took Sexton. He's just like, do you have to do this one? I'm like, I'll be fair. And he's just like, will you be fair or will you stoke the flames because people will take things you say out of context? I'm just like, a little bit of both. So
I was like,
yeah, it's a little bit of both, but no, I said, like, listen, Colin is an elite 3-level scorer. And I said the perception of him coming out of Alabama was he was going to be an Eric Bledsoe type player, where he was going to be more of a defensive specialist who can't really create for others and he can't shoot.
It's kind of been the opposite.
True. Yeah, he still struggles to create for others. He can do basic reads, like the dump downs to Jarrett Allen when he he has 3 defenders confront him in the paint. He drops it down to Jarrett Allen. Like, that was super encouraging. I'm like, I need to see more of that. I think having Evan Mobley will make their life a lot easier too. I think adding Markkanen as a kick out option for him will be really good. I think if Garland gets more comfortable playing off the ball, that helps a lot too.
Yeah.
And if Isaac Okoro's shot is true, I think Sexton can be a passable playmaker, but I need to see it. Yeah, it's the exact opposite, though. Like, Colin was not a shooter when he first got into the league. He took a lot of long twos, and it made me want to rip my hair out. And then after he was snubbed for Rising Star, he just started saying, fuck it, and just, like, his haters were his motivation, is like some of those, cringy graphic t-shirts from when I was in middle school were a thing. He started bombing away from 3, and he
shot
had a
40%.
Yeah, had a pretty good rookie season, had a pretty good sophomore season. I think my friend and co-host Chris Manning really intelligently pointed it out during his review for Colin, saying listen, if Colin wants to take the next step heading into his 3rd season, he needs to start using his athleticism and his strength and his just blistering speed to draw contact and get to the free throw line more consistently, because he's a very good shooter, and this will roundhead out his offensive package if he can just take more free throws and make them, because he'll make them, and he did.
And he did that.
That's an encouraging development. And so then my review, I'm just like, okay, let's look at Colin's shot chart. I'm like, a lot of shots in the paint, a lot of shots in the non-Daryl Morey, the non-Daryl Morey land, and then about 4.5, I think, to 5 threes a game, if off the top of my head, if I'm remembering
4.4 this past season.
Okay, so I'm just saying, if you slightly uptick that to about, people got pissed the other day because I said I ranked Gary Trent Jr. over Colin right now.
Yeah, I'd have to disagree with you on that one too. Respectfully disagree.
I just like Gary Trent Jr. as a player. I like the idea of him as a player, but I don't. We could argue about that for hours on end, though, because you could really break down the minutia of Gary Trent Jr.
Yeah, this isn't a Gary Trent Jr. versus Sexton podcast.
It's not. So I just said, and then I followed up saying, listen, I think Colin's a better overall player. I do, but the shot profile Gary Trent Jr. possesses is what I wish Colin had. And then Frank took me out of context. And I'm just like, buddy, you were wrong. And then he never followed, whatever. So if Colin took 8.3 threes per game, just a rough shot number, I'm guesstimating here. His life, I feel comfortable and confident in saying, he'll make a good number of those. and he will also his life will be so much easier offensively that maybe he won't be such a detriment defensively, because I think he can be a passable defender. He has a 7-foot wingspan. He has the God-given ability to defend opponents. We saw it at Alabama.
Yeah,
I still think that's there. But if you make his life easier, if he's more of a if he plays off the ball a lot because of Darius and because of other players too, and let's say Ben Simmons shows up and Colin Sexton is a sacrificial piece, like it's another shooter for Ben to pass to. But I think that makes Colin's life a lot easier, but I also think it makes the rest of the offense's life a lot easier too. And like that's all I said. And so that's just kind of where I'm at now with Colin. I think he'll sign an extension. I don't think it's going to be as high as some of what his fans will get. I know he was in trade rumors this summer. I know the Knicks and the Heat were really interested at first until the Heat went out and got Kyle Lowry, and then I know the Knicks kind of just ran it back more or less.
One rumor I heard was the Thunder wanted Sexton too.
Yeah, that's what I said too. They were intrigued by the. They're. I mean, it makes sense though. If you paired Shai Gilgeous-Alexander alongside Colin Sexton,
that'd be nasty.
Bad. It's a nasty tandem in theory, but you need to see it in execution, of course.
Right.
Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, the man who told the Cavs not to draft him, so they took Colin Sexton after a post NBA Finals spanking against the Warriors.
We could have drafted SGA. The Sixers could have, but 2018 draft is could have kept Mikal Bridges. By the way,
that's like the most interesting story to me is like his mom worked for the team and they celebrated it, and he was so excited to play for the Sixers. And I think he found out 10 minutes later, like, you're going to Phoenix, dude. And it's wild stuff. But back to Colin. So I think he's going to sign an extension. I think he'll be with the Cavaliers long term. I think it's going to be a pretty team friendly deal. Maybe some incentives in it, because the other thing that drives people up a wall with me with my Sexton analysis is where I say, like, yes, Colin Sexton is a very good player. I don't know if he's a great player, but he's a very good player. And then they're like, well, why don't you know if he's a great player? I'm like, because this Cavs team has not won in his almost 4 years that he's been here. They have been consistently mediocre. They've been consistently at the bottom of the East. Granted, last year they were flirting with the play-in, then they lose to Chicago twice in March, and they did some stealth tanking. Like Darius Garland had a couple injuries. Jarrett Allen was setting. Like Issac Okoro. It's basically
Larry Nance was out for a lot of the year too.
Oh yeah, too. And then Kevin Love, surprise, surprise. But towards the end of the season, it was like Colin Sexton, Damian Dotson, Isaiah Hartenstein, Jetty Osman, and then I'm drawing a blank on who would probably Fiondu Kabengele in this scenario. Like Colin Sexton and Jetty Osman and some dudes, and like Kabengele probably won't even be on the team this year, but he has a training camp spot right now. And then Hartenstein has a training camp deal with the Clippers, and much to my chagrin, because I would call him the future Jokic, because just real quick, man, I keep getting on these tangents, but I'm excited to talk about this. Isaiah Hartenstein's first game with the Cleveland Cavaliers, like one of the most fun games I watched last year, because my man almost had a triple-double on points, rebounds, and assists, and it was primarily off the bench, and no one saw it coming. And it was so frustrating because the Cavs almost won that game, and then Hartenstein lost it single-handedly because he was hunting for the triple-double, and he just kept throwing the ball like on cuts to his guards were cutting on the baseline. He'd just try to barrel it in on a bounce pass and just be like an easy turnover, or someone just kept picking him off. I'm just like, bro,
stop. It's like now's my chance.
This is a fun development. Like, no, and then he's like, yeah, I talked to a lot. He's like, I practiced Nikola Jokic every day. So what do you think? I didn't know how to pass. I'm just like, fair, but I think Sexton is a polarizing player. I think so that was my point. Like, make him be a great player. So Justin Rowan and the Chase Down and I actually got kind of heated once when we were talking about it, because he gets mad at me because he thinks I hate Colin unnecessarily sometimes too. And I mean, he is a team employee, so he's entitled to his opinion. But I asked him Justin full stop, because Donovan Mitchell is like his biggest comparison for like what Colin Sexton could be at his apex, like what Don is. And I'm like, so you're telling me if you remove Donovan Mitchell from the equation with the Jazz and you drop Colin Sexton there, you get the same production for the Jazz that you get with Donovan? And he's like, yes, I do. I'm like, you're lying to me. Like, full stop, you're lying to me.
Yeah.
And he's just like, no, I'm not. I'm like, yeah, Colin would be really good for the Jazz, but like, I can't say that with 100% certainty, because Donovan Mitchell also raised the floor of that Jazz team.
He's really good.
He's really good. And like, granted, the Jazz have a really good core like foundation around him.
He
like,
raised the floor of that team.
Yeah, but like they were solid.
Yeah.
And then Don like made them good. And then like they've gotten better as they've gotten more experience.
And he's gotten better every year. And my barometer's playoff basketball. Like Donovan Mitchell's been a flat out superstar the last 2 playoffs.
Oh yeah.
And with the ankle injury.
Exactly. So that's kind of where I'm at. I'm interested to see if maybe as Devin Booker's another popular comparison, not similar in terms of play style, but in terms of like Colin has these preconceived, because you know me, I used to be a huge Book hater, and
I've been a day one Book stockholder, baby.
I understand that. So again, not similar players, but like I call them empty calorie players, where like Devin Booker will score 70 points and the Suns still lose by 20 kind of situation. Colin Sexton could go off for 50 points on any given night, and the Cavs could still lose by 25 kind of situation.
I have a whole Ricky thought on empty calorie players. That whole dichotomy.
I know you do. I'm happy to hear about it, but I'm saying maybe Ricky Rubio is the answer to that. Maybe a fully healthy Darius Garland. From what I gather, Darius is kind of just taking the reins of this team and making it his, but that's my crux on a Sexton argument, is like I think he's a very good player. I mean, the expectations for the 8th overall pick are rock bottom low. Like there's never been an all-star that's the 8th overall pick. Like off the top of my head, just because he was a Cavalier, like Channing Frye is a notable 8th overall pick, and Channing had a pretty okay career. Like yes, he won a championship with Cleveland, but he was primarily a good vibes and sometimes a bench spot up shooter for the Cavs at that point. And like in his last game, he was in his mid-30s and was like looking winded because the Cavs made him play 30 minutes because it was a farewell game, and then he got like stupid drunk in the locker room off his own beer afterwards. But I don't know what Colin would be on a very like let's say the Cavs are a playoff team tomorrow. Let's say they are on track to win 50 plus games next year. I don't know what Colin Sexton looks like in that equation, so I don't know how much money you want to pay him. And that's always been the crux of my argument, is I don't think the Cavs are comfortable either, because you don't want to give this player maximum dollar, because you could just say like, listen, like, because if you're Colin Sexton's agent, you can approach the Cavaliers and say, okay, my client has proved every preconceived notion about the 8th overall pick wrong. He is not an offensive liability like he thought he was out of college. He's improved his game in so many different ways. He works the hardest out of everyone.
Yep,
he
hard
wants
worker.
to be here. All this stuff. Like you can throw all the cliches and stereotypes out. And then you can also mention the fact, that the Cavs have promoted him on social media like every given week. They voted him player of the week every week his rookie and sophomore year, which is just weird stuff when you have like Giannis Antetokounmpo in your conference, but whatever. You could use all that stuff as ammunition, but like I said, I think the market going dry is going to make it tough, and I think the Terry Rozier contract could be the baseline, like the extension he signed with Charlotte could be the baseline of this extension with Cleveland. But obviously you bump it up a little bit, because I think Charlotte's in a lot better of a position just because of LaMelo, and then Gordon Hayward, despite his political beliefs, is a pretty good player for the Hornets. Not a good person, but a good player. But so maybe you bump it up a little bit. I have always said for a while, like 4 years, $88 million would be the absolute baseline. If I were him, I'd accept, but it's maybe something around that, and then you work your way up, and then like if you put incentives in there, like realistic ones, of course, not saying like, oh, he's gonna win MVP. Like he makes an All-Star game. Like I could see Colin making an All-Star game at some point in his life. Hell, he could represent the Cavs next year at the All-Star game, just because he could get the pity vote, or like the fans in the team could really get behind it, or something like that, or like all NBA honors or something like that, or like something bizarre. Like he wins like a certain award. Like let's say he does become a bench player eventually and you win 6th man of the year. Like you do something like that, like realistic goals, and make it more incentive laden. So like you can keep saying like, okay, we believe in what you are right now, but we want you to continue proving us wrong, and we will reward you financially if we do that. Like that kind of situation. And I think that's a pretty fair offer.
That's fair. I would say, and also like my whole thing, the reason I asked that question, and I wanted to talk about Darius Garland last, but I'll bring him up a little bit now. But like we see this in Portland, like a small backcourt that's just not gonna work. And if you are building it I get wanting to have a successful team and not seeing a team that's in the bottom of the conference all the time and being in the lottery. But if the goal is to win a championship or make deep playoff runs, a combination of a 6'1" guard, with Sexton and a 6'2" guard with Darius Garland sharing the backcourt together. I just don't see how that's
6'2" on your part, by the way. I think
I'm pretty sure it's a generous height that I gave for
I'm
both
5'11",
players.
and they're a little taller than me.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I was generous with both players' heights, to be honest. But if that just doesn't work defensively, it might be dynamic offensively. But I think that I mean, the numbers you just gave there, I would say that's a fair. I'd say that's fair. And if he improves and shatters that ceiling, then that's all the better. But there was some more movement.
I mean, the same could be said for Jarrett Allen too. They paid him 5 years, $100 million. They're not going to pay him max dollar because center isn't really like. At least Jarrett Allen's skill set is in a position of huge need. But Jarrett Allen's really good, and like you're Cleveland, you have to pay.
You have to pay
a
him
little bit extra to stay here.
But
they could, because I always make this argument: if you're 22, 23, 24 maybe years old, and you're about to sign a contract for millions and millions of dollars, and you have the choice to live somewhere, why wouldn't you want to live in Los Angeles or Miami or New York or like a destination market versus Cleveland, Ohio, which I love Cleveland. I love it. I will die here probably. That's how much I love it. Like I don't see myself living anywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
But if I was in that position and I had the opportunity to make millions upon millions of dollars, and you get most of this money paid up front too, like that's the craziest thing is also thinking I'm 23 years old and I wake up the next day and my bank account has like $80 million.
That direct deposit hits.
I'd faint. God, I don't even know what to do with that money. But like, I wouldn't want to live in Cleveland. It's brutally cold in the winter. If you like stand here for fun, like people are going to be dogging the hell out of this city because they're hosting All-Star this year, and like Chicago's colder, but Chicago has more stuff to do than Cleveland.
Yeah.
But I didn't mean to cut you off, but that's just kind of where I'm at. So like the Cavs, I've talked to some folks in the organization. They're just like, we're well aware of our status. So like we offer players probably a little bit more than what the market says they're worth, just to convince them to sign on the dotted line so we can retain them.
Well, speaking of extensions, you guys made another move this summer. It's a three-team deal. You guys end up getting Lauri Markkanen from the Chicago Bulls, and you guys extended him on top of already extending Jarrett Allen, on top of already drafting Evan Mobley. Kevin Love's still there, and presumably, hopefully, Kevin Love will play more often this year than he did last year and stay healthy for a bit. I'm just wondering, the more I'm removed from it, I get kind of why they did it, because the Cavs were putrid in every sense of the word in terms of three-point shooting, cramped for the two guards, and I think Markkanen, well, one, he needed a fresh start. I'm still high on Lauri Markkanen. I always go back to his second year with the Bulls, and then I was going through the rosters because, honestly, like, those Bulls games over the last, in the Jim Boylan era going into Billy Donovan, they all blend together. But Lauri Markkanen, the guards he played with, aside from Zach LaVine, who really isn't a playmaker, not the best crop of guards to play with if you're a big. And also Markkanen was hurt. But, you know, the Cavs needed three-point shooting. I think Markkanen provides that. But I'm wondering what else he'll provide. And are the Cavs really going to go with, I'll just say, a Dollar Tree version of what the Sixers tried to do in 2019-20, where they try to go big ball with, Markkanen and then Jarrett Allen. I don't know if Kevin Love's in the equation in terms of starting, but I'd imagine my projected starting lineup, and you could tell me if I'm wrong, I'd imagine it'd be obviously Sexton, Garland, Isaac Okoro, second-year player. We'll talk about him in a bit. Lauri Markkanen, or maybe Kevin Love if Kevin Love has seniority over that position. I would personally start Markkanen, but and Jarrett Allen. So I'm wondering, how does Markkanen fit in this equation? Why do the Cavs have so many bigs? And why am I getting hives just thinking about the Elton Brand Frankenstein team that he put together?
So it is tough because the Cavs do have a lot of bigs, but I present the counter argument that before they had Lauri Markkanen, they had Larry Nance Jr. on the roster, so they had just as many big men on their roster, just not as much money tied up financially to it as they do Markkanen now. But you kind of laid it out. Well, you're breaking it down, Cleveland was the worst 3-point team in the league last year. So in theory, Markkanen will make them better because he was a very good 3-point shooter. I did a feature with him for Facebook Bulletin about him kind of signing with the Cavs, and he joked about it because he's an avid disc golf player, and Cleveland has a disc golf community, and he's just like, yeah, I signed for that, and the fact that there's no traffic, so when I go
It's been a minute
shopping,
since I've disc golfed.
Yeah, it's been a minute for me too, but he's like, also when I go grocery shopping, it's not going to take me 2 hours like it does in Chicago versus 20 minutes in Cleveland. I'm just like, ouch, but fair. It's just not that, but I think Evan Mobley they view as a 4 right now. I think with the money, the TV money coming into play soon, maybe you move on from Jarrett Allen because his deal will look a lot more team friendly and like interesting. If like Evan Mobley bulks up and you think he's more of a 5, I think Markkanen gives you the option because I think Kevin Love is just phased out of the equation at this point. I think when you drafted Mobley and you sign Allen to an extension, like that's 2 clear indicators that, and then you have Larry Nance on the roster. That's your 3rd one for the time being. Like you have 3 clear indicators that you do not care if Kevin Love's here or not. No one's really going to trade for him. He's oft injured. He is on the wrong side of 30. He's making $60.2 million over the next 2 years off the top of my head.
Making 31.2 this upcoming season.
Absolutely disgusting. But I'm not going to say he stole it. I mean, I completely encourage players to get them checks. Like I do not weep for the billionaires that have to sign the paychecks of these players, especially when you're Dan Gilbert and you make your money off the financial crisis.
Like Jalen Rose said, you don't get paid what you deserve, only what you have the leverage to negotiate.
Exactly. And I, again, do not feel bad for Dan Gilbert because he capitalized off minority communities, especially in Detroit and Cleveland. But that's just my rant for another day. So the Markkanen move makes them a better 3-point shooting team. I think he will start the season. I think the starting 5 will be Garland, Sexton, Okoro, Markkanen, and Allen, with Mobley being the primary backup 4 and 5 for the time being. But let's say Evan Mobley's just an absolute gangbuster in camp because there's spacing concerns between Okoro, Allen, and Mobley. Like that's the joke too. Is let's say the Sixers traded Ben Simmons for Love and Sexton. The spacing on that Cavs team theoretically would be god awful. Because then you would have your starting 5 would likely be Garland, Okoro, Simmons, Mobley, Allen. This is before the Markkanen move, mind you. And even with Markkanen, it's still not great.
I'm just imagining the defensive coverage to play against that team.
Defensively, that Cavs team's rock solid. Like Okoro and Simmons would like.
I'm talking about the other team when they have to guard the Cavs on off. That they're just all going to stand in the paint, just like, all right, whatever, shoot it.
Go ahead, just go ahead. We
let it fly.
No, man. Then Ben Simmons is just going to trick all of you Philly fans and just show that he actually was a 3-point shooter all along.
That would be the most hilarious thing. I would actually laugh like a madman, like a mad scientist.
It's like when all the Lakers kids left LA and they finally had a player development coach in New Orleans to work with, and they finally had something to do. Because like Julius Randle was pretty good for the Lakers, and then he became pretty good for the Pelicans, and then just kind of bounced, or then he bounced to the Knicks, and then became awesome for the Knicks. But like, I talked to Julius about it. He's just like, yeah, no, the Lakers wouldn't let us do any of these things. Like I talked to Larry Nance about it. He's like, yeah, the Lakers just told me to dunk and rebound. They did not ask me to shoot. They did not ask me to create plays. They didn't care that I played point guard in high school before I had my growth spurt. Like they didn't. They
that's
wanted
wild.
us to stay in set roles, and I'm just like, that's nuts.
That's wild.
And it is. And then he's like, because then Larry Nance is like, I come to Cleveland, and I'm like, hey, coach, I used to play point in college. Like I can provide some playmaking, or in high school, and I can provide some playmaking, and then. Like, I can shoot threes. Like, that's just how the way the league's going. Like, if you're a big man, you need to be able to shoot. Jarrett Allen said the same thing at media day. He's like, yeah, I'm going to shoot threes this year. He's like, I may not make them all the time, but that's the way the league's going. And, like, players in my position have to be able to shoot threes. And I'm just like, fair.
And nothing's better than game reps, you know?
Exactly. Andre Drummond, I have to come on after you have a little taste of the Drummond experience and just kind of.
I'm not gonna like it. I already know it. Like you don't. I mean, you don't. We don't need to do a pod on this. I'm not gonna like it.
I have a sneaky theory because Joel hates Andre and Andre hates Joel. They're going to bring the best out of each other every single time they're on the floor. Because in 2K, Doc puts those two together on the floor sometimes, and I have to pause and just chuckle to myself. Think about telling you, then I just unpause. I'm like, I don't want to ruin his day like that. But
the thing is, Doc's probably going to do that. this year.
Absolutely. I'm going to be here for it. It's going to be when they play Cleveland, too. And then Tristan Thompson will be back in a Cavs uniform. And he'll bomb a three. But, so jumping back to the marketing thing, yeah, it makes sense because the Cavs need a backup 5, I guess. I think they're going to play Love as a backup 4 and 5. He more or less is going to play – Kevin Love is more or less going to play 15, 20 minutes a night at this point. Like, he is not in the team's plans. He has said, like, I have to earn my minutes in this rotation. Like, I know, like, I'm not really a part of the team's plans going forward. I think Kevin was less than thrilled that he's there. I think, at least from what I gathered, if he – it's like Woj said, like – through that Woj piece, where like through his agent Jeff Schwartz said, we're not interested in a buyout at this time. Kevin doesn't want to leave Cleveland. It's not because he likes Cleveland or he likes the team. Like
he's got 31.2 million smackaroos, right?
Yeah. If you had a ticking time bomb that was a calf injury that Jerry Colangelo dragged you across the coals for, because his calf injury goes hand in hand with the Achilles thing he was dealing with at the beginning of last year. And so it's a scary situation. He needs time to rest and get it better. And hopefully he is. He said he's better, but we'll see what happens.
I'm glad Kevin Love clapped back at Jerry Colangelo, by the way.
Me too.
And obviously I'm biased because of what he did to my franchise and how his son tanked the process. But that was some bullshit what he said. And I'm not trying to,
it made me raise an eyebrow when I saw it. I was just like,
it was like he's trying to, be healthy, and like he hasn't been healthy the last 2 seasons, and he's
got a calf injury,
and for him to just do that, say that,
and he wasn't wasting a roster spot on Team USA. He's just like, I'm not physically capable of playing the way I want to right now, so I'm gonna pull out. So I'm not holding this team back, because Kevin Love was gonna get minutes, I feel, under Popovich, but we can talk about that in a bit. So marketing is just kind of part of the future plans. He's only 24, which is weird to think about. Like you said, his second season was pretty good, and then Jim Boylan became the head coach and became not so good, because I guess he had a really good relationship with Boylan as one of the assistants, and it's just they kind of asked him to be a spot-up shooter. They asked him not to bang with smaller players down low on switches and things like that, and he sometimes isn't the best
probably got snubbed from Boylan's leadership council too.
Probably, and for Chicago, his third season, from what I've gathered, like the Bulls were really marketing him and Zach together as like the faces of the franchise, and like they're both going to be representing an all-star and things like that. And then Lauri just did not have a good season, and it is what it is. He's not saying a bunch of dumb stuff like Denzel Valentine is for the. Dude, his media day yesterday was absolutely wild.
Yeah,
that kind of he can defend 1 through 4, and he's in a winning situation despite Chicago. I'm just like, my guy. I'm taking my glasses off for emphasis here. My guy, have you seen how the Cavs played?
I'm not going to put the video version up, but Evan's taking off his glasses right now, recovering from the fireball that was Denzel Valentine's media day.
I'm glad I paraphrased it correctly, because I thought I didn't hear it right. Then I hit tweet, and I'm like, I think I heard that right. And then other people, somebody like texted me, he's like, did you hear what Denzel said? I'm like, okay, yeah, I definitely heard it right. But,
yeah.
So marketing, I think, makes sense, because Larry Nance Jr. could hit threes like we talked about, but he was gun shy and he didn't like to take threes. He was also injury prone too. And so, I mean, Markkanen's also not the healthiest player either, but he's not awful either. So it's a bit of a mixed bag, but like we talked about, like he's just an option for Garland in the pick and roll and pick and pop. He's an option for Sexton to make an easy read if he's floating around the perimeter. I think the extra size isn't a bad thing. I'm trying to sell myself on it, but the spacing that he provides, I think, will make Allen's life easier. It'll make Okoro's life easier. And if you roll out a lineup of Sexton, Garland, Okoro, Markkanen, Allen, with Allen and Markkanen being the most tenured players of that team, like that's scary to think about. Like I wrote about this for Bulletin about Ricky Rubio, about how like in like the start, so the core players in Cleveland's young core are those players I mentioned plus Evan Mobley. That's their average age is 21.6 years old, and combined they have an average of 2.3 years of NBA experience, with Markkanen and Allen being the most experienced of the two.
That's crazy.
This team's going to lose a lot because of that. Like they had go on a West Coast road trip where they played Denver, both LA teams, and Phoenix in that span. And
Yeah, the start to your guys' schedule is brutal.
It's tough. So I texted a source in the front office when the schedule stuff was starting to leak, and I'm like, so I heard it's Memphis to open. He's like, yeah, we're in Memphis, and he's just like, honestly, we could start 0-10, and I'm like, you really think so? And he's just like,
yeah, I could
just wait.
It's all play. It's either teams that have been in the play-in or the playoffs, and
I mean, they do that, then they come home and play Charlotte and Atlanta back to back. Atlanta made the Eastern Conference Finals, and Charlotte's a very good team. And then they go on the road and play Denver, Phoenix, who was in the NBA Finals. Denver's a very good team.
Both LA teams. And then in Charlotte again.
Yeah, Charlotte again. And it's hard to play both LA teams to begin with. Like, it's hard to play there. And then you
Nightlife
come
is
home
undefeated
for a hot second, and you play Portland, I think, at home. And so Larry Nance Jr. will have revenge on his mind. And we got to talk about Larry in a second here, too. And then you go out to New York, and then you play the Knicks, and I think you play Brooklyn soon after that too. Like, it's a rough opener to the schedule for the Cavs. But the Larry Nance thing, like, it was a PR nightmare when they first announced it. I was just like, whoa! I kind of heard rumblings that he wanted out, but it wasn't officially confirmed. And Larry's one of those guys who like wears Cleveland on his sleeve. Like,
of course,
he's from Northeast Ohio. Like, he lets you know he's a Browns fan.
Obviously, his dad is a legend too.
Yeah, like hashtag gets us is a very popular thing that people say around here about him. So Larry did it was a PR nightmare, and I know some folks who are on the social media accounts. I'm like, I wish you the best tonight as your work phone gets blown up to smithereens because people are outraged you traded for Lauri Markkanen, who isn't the most popular, who had a pretty, like, people weren't very high on him in Chicago, and like he has a distrust in the media because of how hard the Chicago media was on him, which is fair. But then Larry went to Chris Fedor of Cleveland.com/The Plain Dealer and penned an open letter, kind of similar as the Zydrunas Ilgauskas did when he signed with the Miami Heat. We're just saying, like, listen, guys, the only time I've ever been in the playoffs in my career is when my first year here and I made the finals with LeBron. I'm well aware that I have Crohn's disease, and like, I want to play some meaningful, and I'm about to be 30, and I want to play some meaningful basketball with the time I have left in my career. I want my daughter to experience that as she's growing up, and I think I asked the team to trade me, and I'm like, okay, well, he just saved the Cavs bacon. So they kind of moved past. Larry dumping on Ohio on the way out wasn't the best look with his Portland introduction, but I think it's all, there's going to be no bad blood when he comes back to Cleveland in early November. So
I understand why. Like, I understand his perspective, but that's my worry.
And then, and then like Markkanen's like a good addition, and like the contract isn't terrible. Like the last year is, so I'll share some stuff I've learned. So originally the offer was Larry Nance Jr. and a second-round pick to Chicago for Lauri Markkanen, and Chicago said absolutely not. We don't want Larry Nance Jr. We want a first-round pick. So the Cavs are like, okay. So they got Portland involved, got the first-round pick, and then they didn't include the second. And Chicago's like, well, we want the first and the second. And the Cavs are like, well, we don't want to pay Markkanen all this money because he's oft injured, and like, we don't want to commit all this money financially to all of our big men. So I learned this. Lauri approached the Cavs and said, listen, I will make 12 million on my last year of my contract partially guaranteed, so you can waive me, and it only costs them $4 million if they do that, just to get this trade done, because he wanted to get out of Chicago that badly.
Wow.
Well, I mean, he's not a part of the plan going forward.
Yeah.
Like, his agent told me, like,
of
it
course.
became crystal clear when they traded for Vucevic last
year.
Yeah.
Like, once the trade for Vucevic happened, we all kind of saw the writing on the wall. Yeah.
So, and then they go out and make a couple other moves, like, to just kind of bolster their big man rotation, and it just like wasn't clear Markkanen was a part of the plan. So the Cavs are like, you know what? We have had successful rehabilitation projects. We've had unsuccessful rehabilitation projects. Dante Exum is Dante Exum just was an unfortunate one, but like, that's the most recent example of them just taking a shot on a player that maybe, this is a lot more money, obviously, than Exum. Exum made $10 million a year when he came to Cleveland, but you take a shot on this, you see if Markkanen works. In theory, it makes sense for this young team. I just think the inexperience in this roster can make them self-combust, and I just hope Markkanen isn't the fall guy for it, because I don't know. He wanted to come here too. He wanted to come to Cleveland.
Right. And that's my worry with. So I know the Cavs have and it's been said a bunch, whether it be through you or guys like Zach Lowe or whoever, but it seems like the Cavs have internal expectations of not winning, like, being a winner, but taking the next step and making the playoffs via probably the play-in, because I don't see the Cavs getting seeds 1 through 6, and 7 and 8 don't. I have to change my calculus on my analysis, because 7 through 8 means you're in the play-in also now. And I don't think the Cavs are going to get those 2 spots either. And I was kind of optimistic maybe they could make the play-in, but then I think about it more like, even though Larry Nance Jr. was injured, and I watched a lot of the Cavs, like especially the first 30 games of the season, the Cavs first 20 games, they were a top 8 defense. They were top 8 in defensive rating. Their offense was still putrid, but I felt like Larry Nance Jr. had a big part in that. And then when he got injured, that's when things started falling apart, because Larry Nance was not only a versatile defender, but he was a good playmaking big for the 2 guards. And I feel like the lack of playmaking from the elbow, unless Love gets more minutes, but as you're intimating, it sounds like he's not going to be in a big part of the rotation. I kind of worry a little bit about the playmaking from the big spot to kind of, alleviate some of the pressure off the guards a little bit. And I'm kind of less optimistic, but especially for the development of guys like Evan Mobley and Isaac Okoro, who I want to ask about. So we'll start with Isaac Okoro first, because he was touted obviously as a really good defender, but the problem was he can't shoot. His ball handling is a little stiff, and I'm being generous. And obviously he has to work on his playmaking. His offense is basically going to be a work in progress for a little bit, but he's a good defender. He had some games where he couldn't score, but he was a huge plus in the plus minus department because of all the other things he can do. He's competitive. He plays hard. He's a good defender, has size, has an NBA body already. I'm wondering, as in the summer league, like he was in the too good for summer league category, at least from the games that I saw against the Rockets and the Magic, at least from scoring, but I couldn't really see like a marketed improvement in his handle in the 2 games that I saw. I didn't see the entire Cavs summer league, but I'm wondering what the expectations are for Okoro. What do you think? How do you project him heading into the season, and just what jump are you looking for in Okoro? Because I still think he's going to be a work in progress on offense.
See, that's actually a really good question, and I asked JB about that yesterday. Where like, what are you? Because Isaac was unavailable for media day due to a non-COVID related illness, so he wasn't able to speak with the media. So we only heard from 7 of the 8 players that they kind of lined up for the media to speak with. Mm-hmm. So, and he finally is back at practice today, which everything's good now. And then, but they asked JB about that, so they really wanted to experiment with it, because it was just a weird development that happened. Because, like I said, the Cavs were kind of stealth tanking towards the end of the season once they knew the play-in was out of reach. Them and Toronto were kind of shameless about it, and it worked out for both of those teams. So, hey, sometimes tanking works, sometimes it doesn't. Sixers fans will get it, but an interesting, because like I said, they're rolling out Damian Dotson and Colin Sexton as like the point guard rotation for the Cavs, and it was absolutely putrid. And like they're like, we gotta try something else. And Isaac Okoro, showed some playmaking chops at Auburn, but like you said, his handle was a little stiff. He looked a little uncomfortable at times handling the rock. But like the Cavs are in a losing situation. Why not experiment with this? Why not try this out and see if it works? And to a degree, it did. I think you saw it again in Summer League, but the quality of teammate that Isaac played alongside that wasn't named Evan Mobley wasn't the greatest, which, not to knock any of the dudes on the Summer League roster, it also doesn't help that Broderick Thomas was just shooting the ball every time he touched it and was really the primary point guard for the Cavs. But I think, so to get back on track here, when I asked JB about this, I'm like, well, what are kind of some developments you expect from Isaac this year? Well, he physically, like you said, he has an NBA body. He is going to be a stud defender. In a few, he could be very well this year. He was like he had a trial by fire to start his rookie season. Like he was playing LeBron, he was playing KD, he had to play
Yep.
Harden when he went to Brooklyn. He had to defend Kyrie. Like Isaac Okoro had a pretty rough go, and he had to deal with like Chris Middleton and Giannis too. Like Isaac Okoro saw a lot of stuff
Yeah.
throughout his time in his rookie season that just really tested him. And like, yeah, he got burned sometimes. And other times he looked pretty solid at times too. So JB really wants him to explore this playmaking edge of his. He really wants him to not be like a primary creator, but like a tertiary or secondary creator, or just, playmaking by committee. That's the Cavs' approach has always kind of been this way. And hopefully it works. It usually does it, but maybe JB felt like it's the team to buy into it. They need to replicate a lot of the defensive losses from Larry Nance Jr., the playmaking losses from Larry Nance Jr. I think Evan Mobley has some playmaking chops too, but I think you have to work on it a little bit more. Like he showed it at USC. Like that USC team didn't have a point guard, and Evan Mobley was like their lead playmaker for like their primary playmaker for them out of like as an offensive hub, which is tough. Obviously, he's not going to have to do a lot of that at Cleveland, but I think they're going to try and explore that at times too. But you kind of just play to the strengths of this roster. Like, yes, Darius Garland and Ricky Rubio are going to be your primary playmakers, but you need some secondary creation, and especially if Sexton gets kind of some tunnel vision at times too, you maybe need some other folks on the floor that can move the rock too. So Okoro is interesting. I think the bigger question with him is his shot. Like you said, Summer League, like it was clear that he was too good. It was clear that he had a full year's worth of experience under these belt compared to some of these cats, and it didn't really need to play much. I think he proved his point in his limited time there that, like, yes, he's ready to go. I think his 3-point shot, it wasn't completely broken in Auburn. It's like his handle was a little stiff and needed some fundamental tweaking, just some minor adjustments. I had faith in the Cavs player development staff to kind of improve upon a pretty decent foundation to begin with, and then they move forward from there. But he put up pretty similar numbers to his rookie season in summer league play. I just don't think he's ever going to be like a huge offensive hub. He's one of the more if not most intriguing players not named Darius Garland out of the young core. I mean, yes, Evan Mobley too, but like my expectations are tempered for him because he's a big man. He weighs 215 pounds. He's going to be probably brought along slowly. The Cavs don't want him playing center his rookie season.
He's still kind of raw too.
Yeah.
There's
not a huge rush to like throw Evan Mobley completely into the fire.
Like my thing is, I know everybody loved Cade Cunningham, and I mean, this past season was probably the least I watched college basketball in a long time. So I'm going off limited knowledge here, but I thought Cade was the best player in the draft. But I was always maintaining that there's like a 45% chance that Mobley could be the best player in this draft. Well, I love big men.
If Cade Cunningham wasn't in this draft, Evan Mobley would have been the consensus top pick.
For sure. Like, and that I'm a sucker for big men. Like I played center in high school, even though I'm 6 feet flat and I never grew past that. My little brother who hates sports is actually 6'8", so pain. Like Evan Mobley clearly has passing chops. I like his shot mechanics. He's comfortable taking threes. He just has to make them consistently.
And the spacing at Southern Cal is pretty bad for Evan Mobley too. So like he wasn't, and like I said, he was the offensive hub, so he commanded a lot of defensive attention.
But you could tell like he has some stuff to refine out. I don't think he's ready to be a center full time. He's just gonna get put under the basket by Joel Embiid, Giannis, Jokic, all those guys. Yeah. So bring him along slowly and bring him off the bench. The same
could be said for Jarrett Allen too, because Jarrett Allen's a pretty thin center too. But Jarrett Allen is just really
he's bulked up a little bit from his time in Brooklyn, but that same goes for Allen. But
like that's like my player development, like what does Allen need to do this offseason? And same goes because I was like the first things asked, like, have you put on any muscle? He's like, yeah, I put on a couple pounds of muscle. He's like, how much? He's like, you'll see when they announce the official numbers. I'm just like, okay, so we'll see if you actually put on
were they fudged the numbers a little bit?
Yeah, and then like Evan Mobley, they're like, have you put on any weight since college? He's like, yeah, I put on like a couple pounds. He's like, I have no problem keep putting it on. I just have a hard time keeping it. I'm like, God, I wish we all had that problem. But Evan Mobley's brother Issac at USC is pretty similar build wise and height wise to Evan, but he weighs 235. So, and he's 2-3 years older than Evan. So I'm just gonna say, like, for Cavs fans, and if anyone's listening as well, like, be patient. Like, don't think he's like gonna be rail thin his entire career and like just look awkward like on the floor. I think he's gonna fill out. I don't think he's gonna hit 235, but he's gonna probably put on another 10-15 pounds naturally. Like, I mean, like, no one's gonna have the growth of Giannis, but like look at Giannis as a rookie and look at Giannis now. Like if you put a player in an NBA conditioning program, like they're gonna naturally put on muscle and just bulk up over time.
Yeah, yeah. And it's funny you brought up the keeping off weight thing. Embiid had a similar quote today about his weight. He said, "I don't know. I don't get on the scale. It's not good for my mental health," which is absolutely relatable.
It's absolutely. I love it when big guys get me. Like I really do.
Yeah, seriously. But it sounds like he's good. He's definitely going to be getting playing time. It sounds like, but it's probably going to be coming off the bench, mostly at the 4, which, I would probably do that too. This is why I wouldn't be a good executive. I'm more of a throw a person in the fire or throw a person in the deep end and see how they do. I probably would have tried Mobley at the 5 exclusively, but Jarrett Allen's there and he just signed an extension, so you're not going to do that. But I think there's a lot of I think for you guys to get the number 3 pick and to get Evan Mobley, and if you get the thing is the way to counter this small ball skill ball era is to have a big guy with all this length and height and with the defensive instincts and the skill that Evan Mobley could potentially have. I just think you take that. That's why I loved Joel way back when I wrote a shitty blog on WordPress. I gave the Sixers an A+ for their draft in 2014 when they drafted Embiid, because I was like, the Cavs should take Embiid number 1. Like I don't care about the foot injury. Like this dude. And it's hard to compare. Big men, like, they take time to develop, but like not everybody can be an Anthony Davis or a Joel Embiid, but lottery big men, they do take time to develop usually, unless you're just they're a bona fide star from the beginning. That's usually how it happens. There's no in between. And Mobley's going to take time, but you can see the skill sets there, and I hope that the on-court geometry and ecosystem there will at least be more conducive than not for him to develop, which, he's playing with good guards, which we will get into right now. But it seems like Mobley's in a good ecosystem. So with
I think
players,
so too. With players, I think he's painfully shy. I know we'll talk about the guards now.
Relatable.
Yeah, no, but like he's painfully shy. Like his media availability, when he was drafted, like the night of the draft, it was 1 or 2 or 3 word answers. His media availability when he was introduced to the Cleveland media, 1 or 2 or 3 word answers. His media availability on media day, like players spoke to the media 15, 20 minutes. Evan Mobley's presser lasted 8 minutes, 36 seconds because he just gave really short answers. And like I went up there and talked to him on the mic, and I like tried to make him laugh. And I'm like, "So did Jarrett Allen talk to you about doing the all big lineup?" And he just kind of laughed. He's just like, "Yeah, kinda." And I'm like, "So are you gonna do it?" He's like, "I don't know, but I think Jarrett's a really good guy, so I'll just do whatever he tells me to do." And but Mobley's making the right moves. He's apparently been trying to establish an on-court chemistry with Darius Garland quickly because he knows Garland's the lead guard of this team. He's been working with Markkanen in terms of developing his three-point shot and getting comfortable shooting an NBA 3. And then he's been working with Jarrett Allen exclusively, and and he's been in Allen's ear all the time to learn about how to defend big men without fouling, because that's what Jarrett Allen's most elite at, is defending the paint and the rim without fouling. And it's going to be tough for Mobley at first, but he's picked the right 3 guys to work with.
It's hard to have his game. It's hard to have the skill to just have the ability to do poster blocks on dunks, but that's what Jarrett Allen does. Oh yeah.
He crushes the heart of opponents' offense.
Yeah, I was ecstatic when you guys traded for him after,
Oh, me too. Especially
Andre Drummond.
Nothing.
But
bro,
let's talk
about that was my most popular tweet during last season. I think was the Rick and Morty thing, the Rick and Morty clip.
Oh
where he shows Morty what true balance is. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, Cavs fans, when they have to go back to Andre Drummond after experiencing Jarrett Allen as the starting 5 last night, because Andre was out with, I think, just a random injury or a non-COVID illness, and Allen comes out and just looks absolutely incredible. Has like 15, 13, 3 blocks, like isn't dominating.
That tweet had me dying.
And then, no, a couple Cavs folks were less than happy about that. But,
I'd imagine.
It is what it is. I'm like, this is. It's
like
true.
It's jokes,
the
man.
Drummond experience hardens a man.
Yeah,
it's gonna.
I co-host a podcast with a Chris of my own, Chris Okamura, and he's a Laker fan, and I can tell you that the same thing you said, he has said. So I imagine when we do our podcast, I'm gonna be saying the same thing, even though I already know I am.
Yeah.
But
like casual Lakers fans and like folks who just kind of do the NBA in general, or like Rachel Nichols at the jump before we found out what a monster she is. Like people were like saying like Andre Drummond is the move that's gonna put the Lakers over the top. And I'm like,
I rolled my eyes so many times I could see my spinal cord.
I'm just like, come talk to a Cleveland fan real quick, and we'll tell you about the Andre Drummond experience.
How about we talk to some Pistons fans?
Oh no, but the Pistons fans tried to warn me. They're like, "This is what you're gonna get," and it was exactly what it was. I think I talked to Duncan Smith about it. He's just like, "Yeah, Andre's like a nice guy. Like he's really friendly, but he's just extremely frustrating to watch on the floor because you think like you look at his box score numbers and you think he's such an elite player. Like he's an elite rebounder.
And then he'll have a solid, efficient production for like 3 or 4 weeks." And everyone's like, see, yep. Like, see, there's the Andre Drummond. And then splat. Like,
but then you figure out that he has such elite, like, especially offensive rebounding numbers is because he cannot make a basket.
Yep, he
cannot make a shot within 2 feet of the basket. So he just rebounds all of his misses and tries again.
I asked
David. Like, oh my God, I'm sitting in the press box and I'm gonna scream. He's missed 5 shots.
I got my Sixers.
And the rest of the players are just standing like watching with like their hands up, like, dude, just pass the ball.
I got my Sixers preview out of the way because I just wanted to get it done. And I was talking with David Arroyo, who is a Pennsylvania native. And I was asking him like, is Andre Drummond I can't believe we even ended the podcast on that note, but I was like, is Andre Drummond better than Dwight Howard? And he's like, I don't know. He's fine. He's an offensive rebounder. I was like, yeah, he's elite at missing a layup, getting the offensive rebound, putting it back up, and missing it, and getting the offensive rebound and putting it back up. And it was just like, but enough about Andre Drummond. He's not a Cav anymore. You know who is a Cav? You know who is a Cav and who I am very high on? Someone I highlighted in one of my Sly Hooper videos to be a breakout player. And I know he took a leap his second year, but I'm talking about like bona fide breakout, like put your name on the map as one of the young guards of the future, much like De'Aaron Fox did in his second year in Sacramento under Dave Yeager. But I am so high on Darius Garland, especially after the leap he took last year, taking more threes, being more accurate from 3. His playmaking took a leap, 2 to 1 turnover ratio. I really liked what I saw from Garland, and I really think, and I go back and forth on this because Bill Simmons likes to hold this shit against Devin Booker for not showing up to Team USA, which I think is just, like, I get it. Players do get better coming back from Team USA, but Devin Booker doesn't need to go to Team USA to develop and work on his game. Like, not every player needs to do that. But I think the Team USA experience, even though Garland didn't end up making the real roster, I think being around all those players, great coaches, picking players and coaches' brains on whatever it is, I'm just really excited to see what Darius Garland does this year. And maybe he can handle a little bit more playmaking without Larry Nance Jr. there anymore. And you know, Kevin Love not being in the rotation, probably playing like 10 to 15 minutes a game, I imagine. But yeah. I know you talked about it too, and you've done it on Facebook Bulletin, but just talk about Darius Garland and what are your expectations for him this year? I think he could be pushing for an all-star team this year in the East. I think he's going to be really fucking good. Like, he's going to be a cornerstone point guard.
Oh, I think so too. I think he is taking the reins to become the face of the franchise. Like, Evan Mobley long term will likely be the face of the franchise of the Cavaliers. Like, I am so intrigued by, like, you and I are in the same vein, but like Evan Mobley is such an intriguing player to me. Like, I hate the term unicorn, but like he truly does feel like a unicorn player if you give him time to properly season and develop. Like, you could be really looking at something like a really unique player that not many people have ever seen before. But like Darius Garland is firmly taking the reins of this team and saying like, okay, it's my team now. I'm going to be the leader of this team. I'm going to do everything I can to succeed.
Apparently, Steph Curry's new favorite player too.
Yeah, no. Apparently, Steph is going to hit him up and work with him when they have some downtime, maybe before the season starts. If they have a little bit of just, it's not going to really happen, but we'll see what happens at the same time, just because of the San Francisco law. But like Steph wants to mentor him and work with him, which is cool. But unlike Kevin Love, this Cleveland Cavalier made the most of his experience at Team USA. That's my shot for the
wow.
But Darius, for me, I think it's all there. I think he is a truly special and cerebral playmaker. I think he could go nuclear from 3-point range. I think
forgot to mention he's a better finisher too. He was better at finishing around the rim this past season too.
Yeah, like his rookie season was all about like flashes of potential, and you're like, okay, I can kind of see why the Cavs took him 5th overall. And then his sophomore season, you started to see games, you're like, okay, I really see why the Cavs took him 5th overall. The next step for me is for him just to remain consistently healthy. And like I said, granted, towards the end of last season,
the stealth tank took over.
The stealth tank took over, and I think the Cavs kept finding excuses to keep him out because Darius was really coming on strong the second half of the season at times, and I just think that's the next step for him. But like you said, with Larry Nance Jr. gone and maybe Kevin Love out of the roster. Yeah, there's another Kevin Love on the roster. You're gonna have to ask him to do a little bit more playmaking, a little bit more creation for his teammates. I think having Markkanen there, I think having Mobley and Allen there help a lot. Like Allen is such a terrific pick and roll partner, and Darius
they immediately gain chemistry.
They're like best buddies too.
Yeah.
So like it helps. Like Darius is going out of his way to build relationships with a lot of these dudes. Like he has been trying to bond with Lauri Markkanen and get him comfortable to figure out like where he likes his shots and where he likes the ball in certain spots on the floor. That's one of the things he tried to do right away with Allen. Like the moment Allen was traded to Cleveland, he demanded for his number and like called him and said like, "Yo, man, like, do you want to get some shots up at practice tomorrow? Like, if you're allowed to," kind of thing. Like, Darius has he's really a soft-spoken kid, but he's become more and more vocal the older and more comfortable he's gotten. Like to the point where he's like the vocal leader of this team, where like he will pull people. Like I said, he's been pushing Evan Mobley like in practice. Like Mobley shared 2 days ago? Yeah, 2 days ago that he's just like, yeah, Darius pulled me aside and started like got in my face and started screaming at me saying like, I need you to talk on defense because you are the back line of this defense and you are going to be the leader of this team defensively one day. Like, I need you to speak up. He's like, you can't be quiet like this all the time. Like, you need to talk.
Yeah.
So then like he's trying to force him to speak, I guess, but at the same, like, it's encouraging to see that. And then like Darius, you can tell, I think, knows he has the potential to be great. I think an all-star consideration isn't out of reach for him, but
and he cares. He cares about it.
Yeah. And he cares about it. He wants to be here. But I think the biggest thing of all is this is intentional on the Cavs part from what I gather, but they put Ricky Rubio's locker right next to Darius Garland's.
Yeah.
And Ricky in his introductory press conference said like, listen, and he said this during media day too. Like he joked saying like,
I was going to bring up Ricky Rubio, so I guess we'll just get into it.
We can talk about them both at
the same time. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So like Ricky joked with the media because they're talking about how like, because somebody asked him like, are you like a young guard whisperer? Because like Donovan Mitchell made his first All-Star team when Ricky Rubio became his teammate. Devin Booker made his first All-Star team his only season with Ricky Rubio. Ricky Rubio is just like, yeah, they're All-Stars because of me, obviously.
Yep.
So, and then like Anthony Edwards last year said like Ricky Rubio is the best teammate I've ever played with because he cares so much about us young guys being successful. And I think Ricky made a really good point where he talked about how like I've worked with guys like Devin Booker, I've worked with guys like Donovan Mitchell, I've worked with guys like Anthony Edwards and even D'Angelo Russell to an extent. He's like, a lot of these guys are superstars, and he sees a superstar potential in Darius Garland. And he said the hardest thing in this league is when you have a great season, following that up with an even better season. Like, you can be great, but what can you do to be better? And he's like, it's my job to go out there and make sure Darius is better every single day and push him. And then in turn, like I said, the Cavs, I think, intentionally sat these two next to each other. Like, Darius has been picking his brain every single day in training camp. Like, they sit next to each other and talk. He's asking Rubio, how can I be a better leader? What can I do to be a better playmaker to get my teammates involved? Things like that. Like, I think they're forming a healthy, cohesive relationship. And it also helps that Ricky from the moment he got to Cleveland, has been making like a concerted effort to like get to know Darius, connect with him, like both on and off the court, and just like have an established relationship. And it's encouraging to have an adult in the room that actually wants to be here. It's hasn't been that way since Tristan Thompson, and Tristan Thompson can only do so much with Darius Garland. So
well,
have like
yeah,
an actual
right.
player that can like really push someone with such a similar like position and somewhat similar skill set, like Ricky Rubio isn't a shooter like Garland is, but like that's super encouraging.
Same position, he's solid.
I don't agree with JB Bickerstaff saying like Ricky Rubio could start for almost every team in this league. Like I think there's quite a few. I think he would be. I really do think he's going to be traded at the deadline because he's on an expiring contract. And I think if he plays well enough for Cleveland, and he's been really level-headed and like he did say like I didn't expect to be traded. Like, I expected to be traded to a contender, but when my agent told me I was coming to Cleveland, I said okay, I'm gonna make the most of the situation more or less. So, and then like Kevin Pangos will be the backup option there, who has like 6 years of overseas experience. Was a pretty good shooter in college, but obviously isn't the player Ricky Rubio is. But I like the Rubio addition just because if you put it this way, in his first 2 seasons, Darius Garland's primary backups have been Matthew Dellavedova and Dante Exum.
Oft-injured point guards
who can't shoot. And I mean, like Exum had that one amazing game for Cleveland last year where you're kind of thinking like, oh my God, this is why the Jazz took him so high. Like he's so good. And then like he put it all together for one night and then he like tweaked his hamstring and just didn't play for the rest of the season. And he's back in Houston, isn't he?
Yeah. Okay. He's in Houston.
So, I mean, like, I wish Dante the best. He's a nice guy.
But the point is the guards are just...
I had a story with Forbes a while back about the Australian wildfires and the relief efforts that Delly, Dante Exum, and Patty Mills were doing. And Patty Mills was, like, the one leading the charge on it. And, like, I talked to Dante about it. I talked to Delly about it. And then Patty just kept ducking me for the longest time. And then like the NBA PA is just like, yeah, this is kind of past. I just don't think it's a usable story anymore. I'm just like, fuck you, Patty Mills. But so like Rubio obviously can't stay healthy all the time either. Like there are some injury concerns there, but not as concerning as Dellavedova, not as concerning as Dante Exum, obviously. So like you get an actual option behind Garland. And I also think it's important that you have an adult at that position because, again, to circle back to what we talked about like really early into this podcast, this is a really young Cavs team, and they're going to be leaning a lot on these young players. There's going to be times more often than not that they self-combust on the floor, and then they completely scramble, and the coaches can't go out there and like slowly direct them through. Like you need somebody out there.
An extension of a head coach.
Exactly, and like I'm saying, Rubio's more than that because he's a pretty decent point guard to begin with still, but
yeah, he was on a solid Utah Jazz team. Like Ricky Rubio's a good player. It's just he's flawed. He's not gonna raise the ceiling of a contender or anything like that. But he's a good player. You can definitely use him.
I think a team who acquires him at the deadline is going to be pretty happy with their acquisition.
Yeah. I mean, I wish Ricky Rubio would have been in Philadelphia to talk to Ben Simmons, but I have to say, I think I owe Ricky. I'm gonna have to owe Ricky Rubio once I cash in my Devin Booker stock. I'm gonna have to owe Ricky Rubio some of that money because when they finally decided to get an adult, like you mentioned, at the point guard position. One of my best friends who listens is a Suns fan, and we talked about this ad nauseum since Booker was drafted. But once they finally got an adult in the room, and Booker, was able to improve, play off of somebody who knows what they're doing, and somebody who's able to, give advice. Yeah, run an offense. And that's going to be, and, Ricky Rubio's an expiring contract, and the value is just going to be in him, settling the team down, setting the table, and helping develop Darius Garland, who is a rising star. I feel
if you're a good team guy, like that just helps that's what like just to jump back, like in veterans on this team, it's Kevin Love is the other old head in the room, and it makes sense why, because I just think Kevin's on his way out. But I told Chris Manning this the other day. I'm just like, I'm really surprised the Cavs haven't forced down our throats that Ricky and Kevin used to play with each other in Minnesota, and then like Ricky says like they're still like really close, and he's like, yeah, Kevin called me the other day to wish me to like welcome me to Cleveland, but I was on my yacht, so I had to call him back, but I forgot to. So he's like, once we're done, I'm gonna call him, and I'm like,
wow, I
really
wish I had
sweet.
that problem.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, sick flex, dude.
Sorry, Evan. I was sorry, I forgot to call back, Evan. I was kind of on my yacht.
But I think, yeah, like I agree. Rubio's on an expiring deal. I think he'll be helpful to this team. I think like there's numbers there. Like the Jazz finally made it click in Donovan Mitchell's rookie year. They made a push where they went 23-8 to finish the year, and then they made some noise in the playoffs that year. And like Rubio wasn't the reason for it, but he was a part of it. Like you said, he set the table, and like when a team kind of self-combusts and spirals, they kind of just he can kind of help reset and balance things out and calm things back down, which is just something the Cavs have never really had. And yeah, I mean, like John Boehlen is not the right coach for this Cavs team, but like it makes you wonder. Like John,
you mean
Boehlen
JB?
Really?
Oh, are you talking about JB Bickerstaff or John Beeline?
I'm talking about John Boehlen first, because like John Beilin's like safety blanket was Matthew Dellavedova in that situation. And JB used it to an extent, Dellavedova, as a safety blanket too. To say like, okay, well, these young players are shooting us out of the game and the offense is falling apart. We need an adult to go out there and just kind of calm things down, play some defense, and provide some playmaking. Rubio can do plenty of that. And I feel pretty, I understand that the Cavs have a dire need on wing depth. So I think losing Taurean Prince was a little less than ideal, but Taurean Prince is also oft injured, and I just don't know how reliable he can be. He played through an ankle injury, I believe, towards the end of the season, and had ankle surgery. I don't know how much he'll play in Minnesota, but I don't hate the Rubio acquisition. I could see it being a long-term play. Like it's like JaVale McGee. JaVale McGee was the good vibes vet to begin last season. Like things were good, and then it just naturally fell apart because the Cavs didn't have any depth at the point or on the wing, so it just kind of fell apart on its own. So you try something new. Maybe you find a veteran who wants to be here, who makes things better, and maybe Rubio's that guy, and then you just kind of move him on. It's just a good point in his career. And then like if you go to Coachella in a couple of years, you see a Ricky Rubio number 3 Cavs jersey, like you're like, okay, that guy's like unique. He gets real nitty gritty.
Yeah, that's
like, you bought that.
That's an Easter egg. That's an Easter egg of an NBA reference. That's gonna be a hell of an Easter egg in 5 years.
Oh, it's like my Larry Sanders. Like if I I wish I had it, but it's at my parents with my Luol Deng Cleveland Cavaliers jersey. I bought one of those because I was like, you know what, I'm all in. And Luol Deng had like right when they announced it, because I loved Luol in Chicago, but then he had no desire and he just completely quit on the Cavs the moment he got here. He's
just trying to think what a Sixers equivalent would be. Gerald Henderson, maybe, or something
Jared
like that.
Bayless.
Jared Bayless. Oh God, that was one of Colangelo's first mistakes. One of many mistakes.
People hated Bayless, and I'm just like. I don't get why. And then I watched them, like, now I get it.
Yeah. I have a few more questions before we dip out, but first I want to ask, we've talked about JB Bickerstaff's, I guess, his vanilla offense and the lack of creativity with his offense. Now I understand he has had young players so far in his tenure with the Cleveland Cavaliers, and it's hard to, maybe, you're trying to fit the system around an amoeba pretty much, just a constant fluidity of players and and also, like, if I'm being honest, the Cavs young core, I still have questions about it. Like, is it a solid, solidified young core for the future because of the fits and stuff? But now with Darius Garland and Evan Mobley, I think you guys are set, in my opinion. But like earlier before that, I'm wondering, so I kind of think having a lot more talent will help kind of mask that a little bit. But is there any coaches on the staff that are like going to be an offensive coordinator, something like that, or to help JB out a little bit this year? Because the offense was bad all year, even when you guys, or last year, even when you guys were, making a little bit of play-in noise, some brief play-in noise. And I'm just wondering what you think about the offense and how it's going to look this year. It's probably going to be bad, but I'm wondering if there's nowhere to go but up type of scenario.
So it's complicated. No, JB Bickerstaff is saying all the right things. And I think he is the right coach for this team right now because he connects well with this roster. He's not trying the college method like Bayline. I think we need more black coaches in this league, so I'm not calling for his job. But Lindsay Gottlieb left to take the head coaching job at Southern California for their women's team, and she was a player development coach. She was key in the development of Kevin Porter Jr. and Darius Garland. She helped with Jarrett Allen a little bit when he first came to Cleveland, like encouraging him to shoot. But there was a vacancy on the coaching staff, and I wrote about this for a few of the sources saying like this is like one of the biggest needs for the Cavs is like go hire an offensive coordinator, go get Kenny Atkinson, and then Kenny Atkinson goes to the Clippers, I believe, or is he with the Warriors now? Either way, he's in California, and I was like, okay, swing and a miss. I'm like, Jordy Fernandez probably won't come back to Cleveland, but maybe if you offer him enough money, he could be the lead assistant on Bickerstaff's staff because Jordy Fernandez used to coach the then Canton Charge before they became the Cleveland Charge. That didn't work out. They brought in Sidney Lowe, who has a wealth of experience coaching at the collegiate level. He used to be on, he used to be a Cleveland assistant in the 90s under Mike Fratello, which is just, just an interesting footnote in his career. He was with the Pistons as a player development coach. The Cavs are still prioritizing player development. So I think the offense, to jump ahead, no, the Cavs didn't hire an offensive coordinator. If you happen to be a regular listener of my show, I was banging my fist on my desk like every day saying that the Cavs need to hire a coach that has an offensive mind. Like you run it like an NFL team. Like you have a coach that'll set up an offensive system that kind of makes it conducive and more modern for this team to work efficiently instead of Andre Drummond post-ups and being a one-read vanilla offense, because that's the worst thing with Cleveland's offense last year is like they would run one play or one set and then it would break down and then it would just fall apart and they wouldn't know what to do. And then it turns into a heavy isolation play between Garland and Sexton and then like occasionally like kick outs to Okoro or like dump downs to Allen and stuff. Like super frustrating stuff altogether. So I think it's gonna, like, JB Bickerstaff is saying the right things, like on media day, like, well, what do you want to do with the offense? He's like, I want to be more modern. I want to shoot more threes. I want to play at a faster pace. I want to do this, and that. I'm like, okay, this is encouraging. Like, I'm resonating with it. Then literally 5 minutes later, he's like, well, people fetishize the three too much and say, like, he's like, I don't want to be a team that just guns away from three. Like, I feel like, like Houston Rockets of like the old days with like Harden and Morey at the charge and like D'Antoni running the offense kind of his situation. He's like, I still think in this league games are won in the paint first. So I'm just like, fuck me. It's the same offense as last year because Cleveland's offensive apex was getting an established presence in the paint, whether it was through Andre Drummond and Jarrett Allen. And then defenses were forced, and then like Colin Sexton attacking the basket or Darius Garland attacking the rim. Like then you force defenses to collapse, and then you kick it back out to shooters on the perimeter, and then you take your threes there. Mm-hmm. That is the approach Cleveland had last year. They're going to try that again, but maybe at a faster pace. Maybe Markkanen, the addition helps there. Maybe Garland being healthy and Sexton taking more threes helps there. Maybe Mobley becoming a shooter eventually helps there, but I think the Cavs are going to be a very good defensive team. Like, I think Okoro is going to take that next lead because he's just bigger and he now knows how to defend an NBA player and he's had a full season under his belt. I think Mobley is going to be very good right out the gates because I think that's just going to translate the easiest from USC out of like most things in this game. And like Jarrett Allen is just so good defensively.
Fantastic.
Like, those three are going to be great. And then spacing wise, it's going to be a mess offensively. And then I don't know. It's going to be.
Sounds like a lot of the shit. It sounds like a lot of the shit Sacramento Kings fans heard Luke Walton say when he first got hired. It's like, we're gonna play fast. We're going to shoot threes, and then
JB's like, we're gonna get the ball up the floor as quickly as possible. And if you're open for three, we want you to take it. I'm like, yeah, that's encouraging.
Like,
but
it's honestly unacceptable.
What have we done here to make that happen? Like, you can't just like say, oh, we signed and traded for Lauri Markkanen and we're good. We don't need any more shooters.
I was going to say it's honestly unacceptable that the Kings the last two seasons have been outside of the top, hovering around the top 10 in pace. When the year before Luke Walton got hired, they were top 3. Like, you might want to speed up the pace with De'Aaron Fox, but that's neither here nor there. I'm going to talk Kings with Nick Agar-Johnson next week, so that will be fun. But real quickly, just quick answer on this, because I'm only going to bring this up once. Are the Cavaliers in the running anymore, or were they ever in the running for trading for Ben Simmons. Is this ever going to happen? I would like Colin Sexton and Darius Garland, but that's never going to happen. But how were they even interested? Was there preliminary talks? I mean, I imagine there had to be.
I think it'd be remiss of any NBA team not to be interested in Ben Simmons. He's in his mid-20s. He's a perennial defensive player of the year candidate. He's an all-defensive caliber player. Yes, he has his lumps in terms of shooting, and I can diss him for it all the time. But, I love Ben Simmons as a player. He's a big-body playmaker. You don't play him at the point. You play him at the 4 or the 3. And you put some shooters around him and make the spacing work. I think it's hilarious what he said about Joel Embiid, and then what Embiid clapped back with today was even funnier because
Embiid unloaded the clip today.
Built a system around Simmons to make it work, and Embiid is the perfect center to play alongside Simmons. But alas, whatever. Rich Paul.
That made me hate record a video. That the same day I hate recorded a Ben Simmons video reacting to that Sam Amick report. I did the Sixers preview with David Arroyo, so that's why I'm Simmons'd out, and I only want to ask one question.
So to answer your question, broad stroke, I think it'd be remiss of all 29 and other teams not to be interested in Ben Simmons. He's a talent play if you're the Cavs. He would make your team better. I think you would really push the needle towards them being a playoff or play-in team. Yes, there are questions about what he would bring to the table in terms of spacing. I question the fit with Okoro, Mobley, and Allen. It's a lot worse if you have Simmons, Okoro, Mobley, and Allen. But you figure that out later because Ben Simmons naturally just makes your team better. I think the Cavs just cannot offer a package that Philadelphia wants to bite on. A lot of this is posturing on Morey's part too. And why wouldn't you? But at the same time, it's wild to think that they waffled on trading for James Harden because of Ben Simmons, and now some of the best offers are Malcolm Brogdon in a pick.
It is wild.
Kevin Love and Colin Sexton in a future pick or two. That's wild to think about. So I think the Cavs, they could have a chance. Something could happen. I think maybe Sacramento could be a destination for him if they can really get the Kings to do something stupid. But I also don't know because maybe the Kings are being run competently.
That'd be so funny if Ben Simmons was sent to Sacramento and I go to Kings games to cover, the Kings and Ben Simmons. That would be some real funny synergy right there.
He tells Philly, I want to move to California, but they send him. I mean, no disrespect to Sacramento, but
it's an underrated city.
I believe it, but he has Los Angeles in his mind.
Yes, yes. Or the Bay Area.
I think Cleveland had a 5 to 10% chance. I know I reported on it a bit. The Cavs have been interested in a while. And like I said, it's remiss of every team not to be interested. But I would think Cleveland had and the other thing is Ben is open to coming to here. Rich Paul has a very good relationship with the Cavs organization. Darius and Ben are super close. I think Ben wants to go to a situation. I heard from a source close to the situation. Ben just wants to go to a team where 1, he feels wanted, and 2, he knows he's clearly the best player when he arrives. If he came to Cleveland, I think it's pretty obvious he's the best player on this roster. So Cleveland is an ideal scenario, but I just don't think they can cobble together a package completely mortgaging their future. Because I think Garland's off the table, and Philadelphia is not going to want the stable of big men that Cleveland has. Lauri Markkanen, in theory, would be fun next to Joel Embiid, but at the same time, maybe if Philly gets a third team involved and they reroute Colin Sexton somewhere else, because Colin Sexton makes sense. But if you're Philadelphia, you probably want to get a veteran who's more established, can help now. Because that's we can go back to my argument about Sexton. What does he look like on a great team? If you drop Colin Sexton on Philadelphia, do you get the same production you do in Cleveland? Maybe not. And then Colin Sexton could also piss Joel Embiid off really fast too. Colin Sexton pissed off quite a few players in the Cavs last year.
And Joel Embiid, he's even talked about it a few times. It's hard to get his trust, especially, and I don't blame him with the multiple front office regimes and the crazy shit that's happened in Philadelphia. But you want to tread lightly with the big men. All right.
You want to trade with the best players. I give him a 1% chance at this point. If I woke up, we wrapped up this call and the Cavs trade for Ben Simmons, I'd be stunned, but I also wouldn't be surprised because, it's going to be a long, drawn-out process. We'll see.
All right. No more Ben Simmons talk. Last question.
Mike.
We did the wide receiver incomplete sign with the no more Ben Simmons talk, and Evan hit his mic. But last question. When it's all said and done, do the Cavs make the play-in? No.
No. And here's my argument, because I have a list pulled up in front of me.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go through the top 8 teams in the Eastern Conference.
Yes,
I think
let's.
it's Brooklyn 1, Milwaukee 2, Atlanta 3. You can waffle between Miami and Philadelphia for 4 and 5.
Mm-hmm.
The Knicks are going to be solid. The Celtics, I like the Udoka hire a lot. Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown are both phenomenal. Like, the Celtics are going to be in that consideration too.
Mm-hmm.
The Bulls were my most disappointing team last year, but I love
their offseason.
I love their offseason. We'll just see if Billy Donovan can put it all together. Like, the Bulls will be in the conversation. I think the Raptors, the Knicks, I think the Raptors will bounce back. I think them playing back in Toronto, not being in Tampa is huge. Like, I like the Scott. Either the Raptors are going to be really bad, or they're going to be just okay to make the play-in scenario.
I mean, they still have OG Anunoby, Pascal Siakam, and Fred VanVleet. Like,
they have Nick Nurse coaching. That team.
And
Nick Nurse is like one of the best coaches in the league.
Yeah, I personally think he's top 2. But he's a. I love Nick Nurse. I love the shit that he. I love the shit that he did. I like Nick because he throws shit at the wall. Like, he tries everything, and if it works, it doesn't. But at least he's willing to try stuff. I'd say the Pacers too could see an improvement. The Pacers
are up there
with Rick Carlisle.
The Wizards I like the Spencer Dinwiddie acquisition. I think getting Kyle Kuzma in theory makes you better. I think
we're already at like 9 or 10 teams, so I guess that's the argument right there.
And then the Hornets are going to be better next year. Like, actively next season, the only 2 teams trying to tank are the Magic and the Pistons. Like, the Cavs are going to try their best to be a good team.
Yeah,
I just think the rest of the Eastern Conference, outside of Orlando and Detroit, is better.
I think the East.
That's just kind of where I'm at. Like, I think they'll be in the conversation. I just don't think they'll make it.
I think the East, actually heading into the season, might be the best conference.
I agree with that.
I think the West is. There's a lot more questions in the West.
Of KD coming to the East really set the tone on that, and I think
Giannis staking his claim, I think, is the best player in the world. And
then Atlanta's going to be scary too, because they now know how to win, and like Nate McMillan is making the Pacers organization look super idiotic right now.
I took some truth serum on the Sixers preview pod. I think Atlanta is going to be fucking fantastic. I think they're going to be better than Philadelphia. I think their ceiling could honestly be the 2 seed. I think Brooklyn's the undisputed favorites. But I just love Atlanta. But what were you going to say?
I do too. I think Trae Young becoming a villain is such a fun development too. Like,
it's such a fun
for everyone to hate too.
And the fact that it happened in New York too.
Like, him being so dicky to the Knicks and like just ripping the hearts out of Knicks fans and like making an effort.
And then showing up at a WWE event in Madison Square Garden and just stoking the fire.
The league needs a player for like their most popular market to hate, and if it's Trae Young and it's Atlanta, like, Atlanta's a fun story. It's a historically black city with a black coach, and they have a really good young exciting squad. Like, this is a good situation for the league.
And Joel Embiid was kind of that heel for a bit too, but I think now that he's older and has a dad, Jordan, what are you talking about? But he does have a dad, but I'm talking about he has a son now. He is a dad now. I think he has different perspective.
He's got the LeBron energy now.
Yeah, he's got Embiid with dad strength. Oh my god. But he's not the heel anymore, and Trae Young is he's like the Deku to All Might. He took the one for all quirk for being a heel and has just ran with it. But yeah, this is it. We just named 12 or 13. We named 12 teams, and I honestly I kind of like the Magic too. I like a lot of their players. I do
too, but
I still have Wendell Carter
trying to win.
Yeah, they're not, but I like the Jamal Mosley hire. I like all the guards they have. I'm still clutching on to my Wendell Carter Jr. stock, because now that he's in a new situation. But the Cavs, it's not I can't see the Cavs making the play-in either.
I think they'll be in the conversation like last year, and then maybe we'll see some self-tanking. But unfortunately, that also might cost JB Bickerstaff his job. That's the only thing that sucks, is like Kobe Altman and JB Bickerstaff could be gone after this season, and the Cavs will rinse and repeat. And then I'll be talking about how good the Cavs will be in 4 years again. And then I'll be in my mid-30s at that point. Maybe the Cavs are relevant, and it makes me sick. It makes me want to spit. I'm not going to do that because it's my apartment and I have to clean it up afterwards. And I'll just be like, why did you spit on the floor?
Your cat will be Finnegan will be looking at you like you're crazy.
Man, he ditched like right when we started recording. He was like laying on the arm of my couch, and I was like, "Oh, that's nice." Just
well, I don't blame him. We went almost 2 hours talking about Cleveland Cavaliers. I don't think even the most hardcore Cavs fan would want to sit through that. No, I'm just kidding. But I did take up too much of your time talking about the Cavs. But I just think they're one of the young teams that are just intriguing because there are odd-fitting young players that fit together. But you guys also have, the point guard and the franchise center, which I think is just essential as the backbone of a team if you're trying to build it out. So I really appreciate the time, man.
No problem, dude.
every time we come on, these pods always go long, but you're always fun to talk with about Cavs, basketball, whatever. You're the homie as always. You're always welcome to come back if you ever want to vent. So Evan Dammarell, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming on the show. Please check out Down Euclid. He on Facebook Bulletin, Evan's new independent venture. Check out Fear the Sword. Check out the Locked On Cavs podcast with his co-host Chris Manning, and just check out follow Evan on Twitter too at amnotevan. It's been really cool to see your rise the last 2 to 3 years.
I got the blue check mark. It means I'm an authority on all things Cavaliers, folks.
Exactly. And
David Locke calls me an expert on Locked On. I laugh and roll my eyes. I'm like, oh, buddy.
Yeah,
I told my boss, I gotta stop doing these anecdotes. But I told my boss, I'm like, you have no idea what you just did by giving me this check mark.
Hey, I'm still trying to. There's a Twitter account that's been inactive since 2010 that has my full name in its @ and they won't do anything to deactivate it or anything like that. So I'm still.
Jack, if you're listening, help Jordan out.
Yeah, please, because there's only one Jordan Christmas. Yeah. All right, Evan, this was fun. Thank you again, and we'll talk to you soon, man. Yeah. Hopefully about other fun stuff, because I want to revisit. I'm not going to revisit Attack on Titan, but there are some fire anime that and other video games and all that stuff that I do want to talk about. Hopefully a PS5 will be available soon, because I love the upcoming games that are coming up this year. But
I can't relate personally, but
okay. My dad did the same thing. He's like, yeah, man, you can't find a PS5, can't relate. It's like, all right, whatever, Dad. Can I come over and play Miles Morales?
It's a good game.
Evan, thanks again, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks to Evan again for hopping on the show and giving his insight on the Cleveland Cavaliers. It's always good to talk to him, learn some interesting things. I'm very much hoping for a Darius Garland, De'Aaron Fox-esque breakout type of year from Garland this year. I think he's going to be really special. But shout out to the homie Evan. Shout out to you, the listener, for listening to this podcast, especially if you made it this far, because we did go long, but it's always fun to that's just what happens when there's a fun conversation, like I mentioned off Jump Street at the beginning. It's always just fun to talk hoops with the homies, and sometimes you'll get a long pod out of it. But thank you for listening. Please spread the word. Leave a 5-star rating if you like. Leave a review if you want to. But please spread the word. It'd be much appreciated. And we will see you next time. We will be talking Sacramento Kings, and we're going to be talking about it with superfan Nick Agar Johnson, another good buddy of mine, former hashtag basketball teammate. Well, I guess technically I was back on hashtag this year, but we are former hashtag basketball teammates, and it'll be fun to talk with Nick about the Kings, another interesting young team that kind of has had some history in terms of franchise dysfunction, but we'll see how the outlook looks now that training camp's here. But anyway, thank you for listening, and stay tuned for next week. And until then, deuces.